have been busy on all of our lakes doing testing. So please look at or log into lakeforecast.org and be sure to check out our weekend lake reports with our own Adam. He just puts his own spin on it. It's wonderful. Along with many other hats, I'm also an agent with First Weber. I'm proud to be part of First Weber that totally buys into the Clean Lakes mission of that our lakes are the center of our community. So I would like to thank them for being a presenting sponsor. I'd also like to thank the Edgewater as a hosting sponsor, our supporting sponsor, Johnson Bank, our production partner, the University of Wisconsin Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies, our media partner, the Isthmus. I would like to introduce Adam, so everybody enjoy.
All right, thanks Marilee. Good morning everyone. Full crowd today, zebra mussels. It's an exciting topic. Everyone wants to hear about it. Maybe it's an exciting topic for not a great reason, but we want to hear more about it nonetheless. So today we have Dr. Jake Vander Zanden from the Center for Limnology here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Limnology invented here at the University of Wisconsin, correct? Or started here? We'll hang our hat on that. So his research aims to understand how human activity impacts our lakes, which is very important, which happens a lot here in our lakes, and kind of what we can do about it. And many of his recent studies have focused on the aquatic invasive species, such as zebra mussels, which we're going to find out. So the primary emphasis of his work has been here in Wisconsin lakes. However, he is worldly and has worked in places like Mongolia, Iceland, Mexico, and New Zealand. So very exciting. And he maintains one of the most popular classes at the University of Wisconsin, Limnology and the Ecology of Fishes courses. Very exciting courses. I've had friends that have taken them, so that's exciting. So without further ado, please allow me to welcome Dr. Jake Madison.
Well, thank you, Adam, for the introduction. I'm going to get my mic set up here. Turn it off. All right. Can you all hear me? Okay. I'm going to turn this off. So I have two mics otherwise. Oh well. Yes, hi, Colin. All right. Well, thank you. Clean Lakes Alliance and everyone here for the opportunity to come and talk about this exciting topic of zebra mussels in our lakes. I want to start by acknowledging some of the people who have really done the work that I'll be talking about. I want to give a shout out to Mike Spear. Can you raise your hand and say hi? So Mike is the graduate student at UW-Madison who is dedicating his life to trying to figure out what's happening out there in the Madison lakes. And of course, Mike has the undergraduates that are working with him, and they're all kind of sitting around. Can you raise your hands? So they are also dedicating their summer to figuring out what is going on out there. So there's that, and so this is really how these insights are being produced. I also want to acknowledge Jake Walsh, who many of you know. He recently finished his PhD working on the spiny water flea, which was our invasive species that showed up here in 2009, and has done a really fantastic job at providing some insights into the changes in our lakes that have come from spiny water flea. And so today I want to reflect back on some of these changes on spiny water flea, because I know in the discussion this morning, just talking to people over coffee, everything is about zebra mussels. But I think that we can't say as much about what's going to happen in the future. If I had a crystal ball and knew really what was going to happen in the future, I might be sort of in the stock market field rather than limnology. But we can look back and see the sorts of changes, use that as sort of a frame for thinking then about what will happen going into the future as zebra mussels invade and become part of our community here in the Madison Lakes. And I would say really in the last week or two, since I started putting together this talk, we may be seeing some of these really dramatic changes. We're seeing a sign of some of the dramatic changes that we would expect to see in the Madison Lakes as they are invaded by zebra mussels. And 3 weeks ago, I didn't feel like we were seeing those changes, And now I do feel like we are seeing that. And so I think many of you may have also seen, hey, there's some things in the lake that I haven't really seen before, and these things are happening right now. So we're really kind of dealing with the timely issue. So anyway, I want to talk about zebra mussels and spiny water flea and what they mean for water quality in the Madison lakes. And I don't want to underemphasize the important role of spiny water flea in changing things out there. And then now we're adding zebra mussels to the mix. So I want to start off and be consistent with our limnology 101 theme. I'm going to give a broad overview of limnology and things that affect water quality. I'm going to focus on Lake Mendota, but this is general stuff that's relevant to whatever lake you care about. Then I'll talk about spiny water flea, give an overview of what we've seen and what we've learned, and then finally talk about what we should expect from zebra mussels. And in a sense, just as of the last week, I think I want to change this to say, hey, what are we kind of starting to see? So there we go. So limnology 101, basic principles about how lakes work and things along those lines. All right, the first thing that we all know, and something that probably all of you know, is that phosphorus turns lakes green. And some may ask, well, how do we know this? There's been a lot of different lines of evidence that show that this is the case. But the evidence that most clearly has shown this and convinced people that this is the case are whole lake experiments. And this is from a whole lake experiment up in Ontario in a place called the Experimental Lakes area, where they added carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus to one side of the lake. And then right here, dividing the lake in half is a curtain that isolates the water. And then on the other side, they just added carbon and nitrogen. And so you see when they added carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus, they ended up turning the lake green, and there were blue-green algae blooms. And then the other side they didn't get. So, the experimental evidence was really like the smoking gun that it's about phosphorus. And as a result here, when we're interacting with the Clean Lakes Alliance, we hear a lot about phosphorus and the need to control phosphorus. And of course, there are other nutrients that algae need as well, but it's really key to focus on the phosphorus story. Okay, well, let's look at Lake Mendota. And this is some data from Lake Mendota that is from our LTER monitoring. And what we're seeing here is this is the data just pulled off of the LTER website. What we have here is the average water clarity as measured using a Secchi disc, which is this disc that you lower over the side of the boat, and then you mark the depth at which the disc disappears. And what we have here is 1995 until the present. And if you're up here, if you have a high value, it means you're clear. And if you're down here, it means that your water is murky. And so what we see is that it's bounced around from year to year. And we've seen a bit of a trend. So here's my question for you. So what's happened to the Secchi disc in recent years in Lake Mendota? Now these are the averages, so it's going to vary from day to day, week to week. But overall, what's happened with the Secchi disc? Yeah, it's gotten a little bit worse. And what determines the Secchi disc? What's the main factor that determines the Secchi disc reading? Was the phosphorus causing it to be bad? It's algae, okay. Yeah, so it's algae, and it's a particular type of algae. It's the algae that's floating up in the water column. Because if algae is down on the bottom, then that's not an issue. So we're talking about the algae that's floating in the water, and that's called phytoplankton, but we'll just think of it as the algae floating around. So yeah, so that's what determines the Secchi. So this would suggest that, well, we overall have had a trend towards more algae. What do you think determines the amount of algae? Phosphorus, among other things, but phosphorus is a key factor. And so, based on this, what would you predict the recent trend in nutrients has been? You might think it's been increasing. Well, we can look at that. What has been the trend in phosphorus floating to Lake Mendota over that same time period? And what we see is that it hasn't really increased overall. It's bounced around from year to year. So each year, we have an estimate of the amount of phosphorus that was loaded into the lake from the surrounding watershed, both urban and agricultural. And it bounces around from year to year, and it depends on primarily the rainfall and these large rain events. And we see that there was a spike here in 2008, 2009, because there was a lot of rain, some big storms around then. And but there's really no significant upward trend. It just has gone up and down. So you could say maybe there's a bit of a slight upward trend. So what we're seeing is that we're seeing these changes in the water quality, but it doesn't really correspond with the phosphorus loading. So what that tells us is that, okay, phosphorus affects the amount of algae that's there. That makes sense. But there's other things too, right? And so it's not just all about phosphorus. There's something else. And that something else has to do with the ecosystem itself, and specifically the biology of the system, the food chain of the system. So that's what I want to talk about a little bit. And this is how the spiny water flea and zebra mussel kind of come into the story of understanding water quality. So yes, phosphorus is really important, but there are these other biological factors that influence the water quality in a significant way as well. The linchpin, the key actor here, is Daphnia. Okay? And so we're going to sort of frame a lot of the story, at least this first half, around this species called Daphnia. This is Daphnia pudicaria. It's a tiny crustacean. It is our best friend here in Madison that many of us have never really heard of, but they are incredibly efficient consumers of algae. They feed on that free-floating algae, and they are capable of keeping populations of algae down. There are huge numbers of these out in Mendota, even in a bad year, and they do a really good job at knocking down the amount of algae. So, again, getting into this 101 sort of approach, let's imagine a lake where we have not a lot of nutrients. So maybe we're up at a lake in northern Wisconsin, you don't have agriculture in the watershed and nutrients coming in. The algae grow pretty slowly. So algae are growing, but you don't get these major blooms. They grow slowly. They don't have a lot of nutrients. All right, now imagine we come down to southern Wisconsin. We're on Lake Mendota. There's a lot of nutrients being loaded in the system. What happens is that the algae grow rapidly. The growth rate of the algae is higher, and we see these big blooms. We have poor water quality. There's another scenario where we could have high nutrients. It could be in a lake in southern Wisconsin. The algae could grow rapidly, but if Daphnia are abundant, they can consume that algae nearly as fast as it's grown. And you don't see these big balloons showing up because the algae that's being grown gets eaten by the Daphnia. And so that is a phenomenon that we want to have happening out there, and has been something that has over at various times characterized our Madison lakes. They've been pretty good at knocking down these algal blooms and keeping them from getting too big. So that is basically the sort of the role that this species can play, and at some points in the Madison lakes has played. So just to recap, how much algae is really a factor of two things. Okay? The first is algae growth rate, which is determined by phosphorus. And there are going to be other things that determine the algae growth rate too. Anybody want to suggest something else that could be important? Temperature, nitrogen, light. All right, great. Those are the ones that I was thinking of. So those are all other factors. So of course it's not just about phosphorus, but phosphorus is key. And Daphnia grazing. And of course Daphnia grazing are going to be affected by things like who feeds on Daphnia. So, all right. So that's sort of the Limnology 101, kind of gives us a foundation to think about the role of nutrients and also the food web for the changes that are happening in our system. I want to talk now about spiny water flea. Spiny water flea is something that you probably have heard of, especially if you come to these Yahara 101s on a regular basis. It's an invasive crustacean. It's native to Central Europe, Eastern Europe. It's kind of middle part of Eurasia. And it's invasive in North America. It got into the Great Lakes in the 1980s and has been spreading around to inland lakes over the past couple of decades. They are predatory on other zooplankton. So I think of them as a long-lost cousin of Daphnia, but Daphnia feeds on algae. The spiny water flea, although it's related, feeds on Daphnia and other tiny crustaceans in the water. So this is a predator. Think of it as like the wolf of the lake. And we know what types of environments it lives in. It has shown up in a lot of Canadian lakes. These are deep, cold, unproductive Canadian shield types of environments. So this is sort of my mental image of a spiny water flea lake. It's a lake up somewhere in Ontario, unproductive, cold lake. Here's the spiny water flea here, kind of a close-up. This gives you a sense for how large they are. And one thing you'll notice, they have this really long spine, which makes them so that they're not vulnerable to fish predators. So of course a large fish is going to be able to eat this, but tiny fish like baby perch are not going to be able to eat this guy because of the long spine. Okay, Well, in 2009, spiny water flea was discovered by students in the limnology class, and they pulled up a zooplankton net, and I was out with them, and they showed me the contents of the net, and it was just teeming with spiny water flea, which was a big surprise to me because I view this as a species that inhabits cold northern Canadian shield lakes. So wow, what's going on here? They were at densities that were incredibly high. I would say higher than I had ever seen anywhere before. Jake Walsh, who is shown here, began his PhD around that time and dedicated his time to trying to figure out what was going on with the spiny water flea. And so this work that I'm going to be talking about now is really a summary of some of Jake Walsh's work on spiny water flea and their dynamics and impacts. So here's the data for the abundance of Daphnia in Lake Mendota. So along this axis we have the amount of biomass of Daphnia, and again remember Daphnia is our friend who grades on algae, and then here we have time over the last 20 years or so. And so what this shows is a lot of variation from year to year. The thing to note though is that this is on a weird axis, it's on a log axis, so the changes are sort of compressed here. So something going from here to here is a really big change. So what we've seen is that there has been a change following the 2009 invasion. A lot of noise going from before to after, but just even looking at it this way, you see that Daphnia abundance was higher, and then after 2009 it drops down, and it's driven by a few years when the Daphnia populations were really low. Okay, so let's think about this. We have spiny water flea coming into the lake, and this lake previously has Daphnia, which were feeding on phytoplankton. These phytoplankton were being kept down because there were a lot of Daphnia out there. And the reason why was because there were not a lot of small fish, because there were pretty healthy populations of large fish in the system. Okay. Well, this situation was a pretty nice opportunity for spiny water flea to get in, because there weren't a lot of these medium-sized fish that would feed on spiny water flea, and there were lots of Daphnia out there. The spiny water flea got in, became really abundant, they had plenty of food, and they knocked down the population of Daphnia. Populations come down, and the algal populations increased. And so this is kind of the schematic of the changes that have happened in the system, and now we can actually look at the data that show that this is what happened. So here we are expressing the data in a way that's somewhat unusual in that we're looking at the pre and post. Pre-2009, post-2009, seasonal changes in Daphnia. So what this shows is going from January through December, how the abundance of Daphnia changed over time. So this is not a static thing. They go through these annual cycles. So the blue line shows the pre-spiny water flea abundance of Daphnia. We see it's low, comes up in summer, and then it comes down in fall again, pops up again in late fall. So this is what was happening before spiny water flea got in. Following the spiny water flea invasion, it drops down. So overall, there was about a 60% decline in our friend Daphnia following the invasion of the spiny water flea. And if we look at the Secchi disk, we can do the same thing. So blue is the pre-spiny water flea, red is the post-spiny water flea, and again, we're looking at the annual cycle going from January through December, and these lines represent the overall average cycle of the water clarity. And so what we see is a shift downward following the invasion of spiny water flea. And when we compare the pre and post periods, we see a loss of about 1 meter of water clarity in Lake Mendota, on average. So that's a pretty significant chunk of water quality that we've lost there. So this was work that Jake Walsh published last year, and as part of this study, he also emphasized the economic angle on this, and asked, okay, well, we've lost this water quality, water clarity as a consequence of this invasion. Let's express that in economic terms. And so he estimated that in order to regain 1 meter of water clarity, and we want to get 1 water meter back, spiny water flea are here now, how much would we need to reduce the phosphorus loading into Lake Mendota? And the number that he estimated was about 70%. So if we could reduce P loading by 70%, that would get us back to where we were with water clarity before the introduction of spiny water flea. 70% phosphorus loading reduction is huge, and it would take a tremendous amount of work and effort. And he estimated how much this would cost based on this consulting report, the Strand and Associates report, and estimated based on the cost of various practices, it would be somewhere in the order of 100 million ballpark. So, his an interpretation of this is that this invasive species came in and did damages that you could put a dollar value on that are in the ballpark of $100 million. In that, bringing back that loss of environmental quality would cost about $100 million. So it's doable, but it's expensive. And we all know that trying to reduce phosphorus loading has been a challenge, and that it's not something that you can just snap your fingers and do. Okay. So that's the sort of story for spiny water flea in the Madison lakes, and we've seen that it's had some big changes. And I think the lesson here is that invasive species can come in and have some pretty transformative impacts on the system that has consequences for humans and for the quality of the environment, and it's something that we really experience. I want to talk a little more about spiny water flea and the sort of weirdness of the situation before we get into the zebra mussel story. This bubble here shows approximately where we would expect to see spiny water flea and where they occurred in the past. Here we are, the Madison Lakes. It's outside of the normal realm of where we see spiny water flea. So when they invaded, I viewed this as some sort of oddball situation. Why are they here? This is not where we'd expect to see them. And at the same time, they showed up at abundances that are higher than anywhere ever recorded. So this is the typical abundance of spiny water flea. So it's sort of the number of individuals per cubic meter in the water. It's all typically below 20, often below 10. Up in Lake Mendota, we are seeing abundances averaging around 100 per cubic meter, and sometimes up in the 1,000 to 2,000 per cubic meter range. So they were off the charts in abundance, and that's why they've had such large impacts. If there were just a few of them there, they probably wouldn't have those impacts. So here we have a system that we wouldn't expect to be invaded. It's not the right kind of habitat, and then they get in and they have more impacts than anywhere we've ever seen, and they're more abundant than anywhere we've ever seen. So the reminder here is that often with invasive species, we're surprised, and that's what keeps this exciting, but not in a good way. Okay, so we have invasive species at the edge of its range, okay, kind of out of what we would expect to be its range. And it erupts to unprecedented abundances in 2009. And so we're sort of scratching our heads thinking, well, what happened here? What caused this situation to unfold? This graph here shows the temperature data for a number of years over the course of the summer. And what we see here, black is the zone that's too warm for spiny water flea. Okay. And the middle of summer, so this is July and August, in all these years, the lake got too warm for spiny water flea and killed them off. The red line is 2009. Okay. And so 2009 was an unseasonably cool summer. And 2009 never gets up into this black zone. It stayed cool over the course of the summer, and it never got lethal to spiny water flea. Okay. And so when we saw that, we thought, wow, we happened to get 1 year in there. And in fact, it was the coldest summer since 1895. I don't know if you remember the summer of 2009. I actually don't remember there being a particularly cold summer there, but the data show it. And so this was sort of like a window or a perfect storm for the species to establish and get its foothold into the lake. And so we looked at that and thought, well, if we could basically develop a mathematical model of the spiny water flea population, birth rates, death rates, growth rates, and that sort of thing, and then run that, would it boom in 2009? So this is basically a simple mock-up of the mathematics of a spiny water flea population. And there have been people who have studied this thing before. And then we set it into motion, and sure enough, when we ran that model, seeding the lake with spiny water flea in, say, 1999, spiny water flea never came up, you never saw them pop up. And then in this mathematical representation of the system, with the temperature data from the lake over all these years, in 2009, spiny water flea blew up, their population boomed, and then spiny water flea stayed in the system because they had a foothold, and their life cycle is such that they put down these resting eggs that stay in the system. So it essentially was a phenomenon where a set of conditions allowed the species to boom, and that also suggests another thing, which was that that species could have been sitting in the system for some time at really low levels before it popped out. And so we thought, well, maybe it wasn't just introduced into the system in 2008 or 2009. Maybe it was sitting there latent for some period of time before that. And so we tried different ways of trying to reconstruct what was happening. We went through old archived zooplankton samples. We found 2 spiny water flea from years before 2009. And we did sediment cores. And we reconstructed when we thought the spiny water flea invaded from spines in the sediment cores. And there's Tommy right there who's sitting here collecting sediment cores. The overall summary there is that our best estimate of when spiny water flea actually got into Lake Mendota was 1994. I don't want to say it was exactly 1994, but the point is that we feel that they were there for some time at really low levels we couldn't detect, but then the conditions in 2009 allowed the population to boom, and that's when we really started seeing their effect, and that's when we started feeling the effects of them. All right, so it's kind of an interesting case study. They've had some pretty remarkable environmental impacts, and they've affected water quality. We feel that the population was lying latent for quite some time before the conditions allowed them to boom. So I think of the climate as being like a trigger for them to pop up. And we've seen some dramatic ecological, economic impacts. So I think that sort of provides a case study for the types of types of changes we can see in lakes with invasive species, which brings us to the zebra mussel. And I feel like there's not that much we can say empirically about what the zebra mussels have done because they just got in. But I think we can sort of look at what's happening in the system so far and talk a little bit about what we might think is going to happen. And it seems like in the last couple of weeks there have been some of these changes that we might expect. So, the story. In 2015, the students in the limnology class, once again, were pulling some, they were collecting some insects for part of the class. And one student came up with a piece of rebar, a piece of metal that they found in the lake, and there were literally 1 or 2 zebra mussels on this bar. And this told us they're here. So this was the type of thing that you would see in 2015 if you were pulling up your dock. Maybe some of you had this experience. You pull up your dock and you see something like this. There's 1 zebra mussel, 1 here, 1 there. Okay. Not too alarming, but if you know zebra mussels, you know that this is just the start of it. And so here we are a year and a half later, and this is a typical rock from several meters deep in Lake Mendota. This rock is absolutely covered in zebra mussels, and every single one of those zebra mussels is 1 year old. It's from last year's cohort. So there is the occasional larger one that's from 2 years ago or 3 years ago, but we're seeing these types of densities on the bottom. And here's another photo. You see some zebra mussels here, but you see these green stringy mats. And so we're now seeing the bottom covered with this green, slimy bits, tufts. I mean, the terminology is, there's a lot of words you can use to describe this sort of thing. And scientists have a lot of very technical terms like metaphyton and paraphyton and so on, but I'm going to talk about it in terms of tufts and attached algae and slimy stuff on the bottom. So here's an example of the types of things that we're seeing on the bottom right now in Lake Mendota. So these are photographs just from the last week or 2 weeks. So a little background on zebra mussel. This is a species that has been around for a long time, and people often know a fair bit about this species. I would not be exaggerating to say that this is the most successful aquatic invasive species ever in the history of the world. It's from the Caspian Sea, but it's spread throughout Europe and has become incredibly abundant there. When it got into North America in the late 80s, early 90s, it rapidly spread throughout much of North America. Densities, they reach maximum densities of around 700,000 individuals per meter squared. So a meter squared is an area about this big. Imagine 700,000 of those things within that small little area. They're of major economic concern because they foul industrial intakes and infrastructure, and so they cause billions of dollars of impacts just from the sort of industrial point of view. So if you have a water intake, your MG&E, or you're a water utility, you're constantly having to deal with the fouling of these zebra mussel shells growing on your pipes and intakes, clogging them, and so on. There has been some data collected on zebra mussels in Wisconsin. This is just some data from Upper Nemahbin and Lake Delavan that show the densities that we've seen here. They haven't typically been at 700,000 per square meter, that's the upper limit. Here's from Upper Nemahbin, they seem to max out at about below 15,000 per square meter, which is still a lot. And you can see that you don't see them in these really shallow waters. You don't see them very much in the really deep waters. It's around 3 to 5 meter depths where they're at their maximum. You look down on Lake Delavan, and again, very few in the shallow waters, but around 3 to 5 meter depths, you see them at their maximum. So you might go out to the lake and look in the water in the shallows, and you're not seeing zebra mussels, but they're there in really high abundances down at 3 and 5 meters. And then here again in Delavan, they taper off at these greater depths. In Delavan, you're seeing densities up around 45,000, maximum densities around 45,000 per square meter. So these are just some examples of the types of densities we see in lakes around here. Okay, so they're getting in. They're here in the Madison lakes. There are sort of two drivers of why zebra mussels have impacts on our system, and that is that they eat and they excrete. Okay, so zebra mussels are a filter feeder. They're quite voracious. They live on the bottom on any sort of hard substrate. So imagine here's kind of a cross-section of the lake, and your Daphnia will be coming out here, and here's land, here's the bottom of the lake. And zebra mussels are going to be in these habitats, and they are on the bottom, and they're filter feeding, which means that they're feeding in the water column. Okay. And so they bring in water, they filter out what they want, and they excrete, they take what they want and they let the water go. So, yeah, question?
How fast could one get rid of filter a gallon of water to give some sort of sense of how much water the actually push through?
It's hard to generalize because zebra mussels go from being really small to relatively large. But one way to think about this would be that they are capable of filtering the entire water column of the lake over the time frame of a couple weeks. Right?
Whoa.
So, yeah, once they're in there, right? So they will literally filter the entire volume of the lake. So the lake has passed through a zebra mussel. Essentially, that's one way to think about it. When you're swimming out there, it's been inside a zebra mussel. All right, so they're filtering the water, okay? So think of it as like a little sieve. And they're consuming the free-floating algae that's in the water. So we talked about that phytoplankton in the water that's floating around. That's what they feed on. Okay? In doing so, they clear the water. They remove that phytoplankton and that free-floating algae. And you may say, that's great. And in some ways, it is good to have clear water. That's what we're working for. But what they're also doing is they're excreting phosphorus, okay? Dissolved phosphorus that can be readily taken up by algae on the bottom. And they also excrete, feces and pseudofeces. Pseudofeces is this kind of a slimy material that kind of sits down on the bottom. So they're excreting materials. They're making the water more clear by removing the free-floating algae. And the result is that this bottom habitat becomes a really good habitat for a different type of algae. And so we see a proliferation of bottom algae, what you might think of as bottom mats. Aquatic plants will come up more strongly, so you're familiar with Eurasian water milfoil. It's going to have more light, and it's going to be more prolific. Those aquatic plants are going to be overgrown with a filamentous algae, and you may have seen these tufts, like an aquatic plant coming up, and all this green growth coming off of that aquatic plant. And then this material becomes dislodged and you'll see these floating tufts. And if you've spent any time on the lake in the last week or so, you've probably noticed that there are a lot of these floating tufts of algae moving through the water. Has anybody seen these? Okay, yeah, you've all seen the floating tufts. These are what you would expect in a zebra mussel invaded system. Because the water is more clear, the nutrients are still there in the system, someone is going to take them up. And now you have a lot of light hitting the bottom, you have nutrients being excreted on the bottom, and the algae on the bottom are going to proliferate. And that's really what we're seeing. And I have some video that I can show to highlight this. On Saturday or Sunday this weekend, I was just biking around, checking out some sites along the shore. This is from over near Tenny Park. We have some of these tufts that have washed up into these shallow areas. It looks kind of like the blue-green algae bloom, but I think this is primarily tufts that have just been blown in. And they're sort of yellowish, and the yellowishness comes from bleaching from the sun. So they sit there right up at the surface, and once they're sitting there baking for a day or so, they start to turn yellow. So here we have some tufts. Here we're looking into the water, and you're seeing this stringy filamentous tufts in these shallow water environments. So it's pretty unpleasing, but you note that the water itself is clear. And so if you were to do a second disc reading, you may be able to see the disc go down pretty far, but you have all these tufty mats in the water. And then the thing that we're expecting, and the thing that we're starting to see already, is these wash-ups. And so here we have this, it's sort of blackish, and it's decaying material on the beach. And what this material are those tufts. They float up to the top, they get washed into the shallow waters, and then they get pushed up onto the beach. And this is going to be determined by the wind direction and whether these tufts are being dislodged. And so again, this is over by Tenny Park, and we're seeing lots of these tufts washing in, decomposing on the beach, and this smelled really bad. And maybe some of you have experienced this as well. You've been on the lakes, in there are a few places around the lakes right now where the smell is really bad, and you're seeing this decomposing material washing up. Okay, so here's the way to think about how the ecosystem itself changes. In a lake, we have things on the bottom. We'll naturally have algae growing on the bottom, and then we have the phytoplankton, which is up in the water column. And the productivity in the bottom goes up into invertebrates and into fish, and then into larger fish. And then in the water column, it goes up into plankton like Daphnia, and then smaller fish and larger fish. And with zebra mussel invasion, we see the bottom productivity increase, we see the invertebrates on the bottom increase, and we see in this open water environment, those decrease. So this is essentially kind of a cartoon that shows just the shifting productivity of the lake. So the focus of the attention in the lake really goes towards the bottom rather than up in the water column. And then what studies have also found is that fish tend to switch their feeding over towards feeding on these bottom pathways as well. So another way to think about it would be, in a lake without zebra mussels, we have green water, and this makes it so that a lot of light doesn't hit the bottom, right? It blocks the light because the water has got all this algae in it, and you don't have a lot of light hitting the bottom. And so most of the productivity of the system is in the open water, okay? And then you put zebra mussels in there, they clear the water, and light goes down to the bottom, and the nutrients are there, so the productivity of the system is really all on the bottom. So I would argue that with this zebra mussel invasion, we're shifting the lake from a system that looks like this to a system that looks like this. Now, this green stuff here doesn't look too bad, but this is just a cartoon version. This can be excessive, and it can be a pretty significant overgrowth. So I'm not sure this is an accurate representation. This looks like a little green beard here. So we're shifting it more towards bottom dominance, benthic dominance. Okay. Other impacts, zebra mussels are known to come in and smother native mussels. They will live anywhere they can find something hard to attach to. A tiny little twig, zebra mussels will be on that twig, they'll colonize it, and one of the things they really like to colonize are native mussels. So in places where zebra mussels have invaded, we've almost always seen the native mussel populations decline dramatically or become completely extirpated. They can facilitate the invasion of other invasive species like brown goby, because round goby love feeding on zebra mussels. They both evolved together in the Caspian Sea. So zebra mussels are here now, and if round gobies find their way into the system, they'll do really well because their favorite food is here. So you often see round gobies following up. Zebra mussel invasions do promote blue-green algae. It's complicated and it depends on a number of conditions, but zebra mussels do change the ratio of the different nutrients in a way that tend to promote blue-green algae, and blue-green algae are not readily consumed by zebra mussels. So zebra mussels eat the other algae, and then blue-green algae are able to better compete for the nutrients that are there. So overall, it tends to favor the well-being of the blue-green algae over the other algae. And as I noted, it promotes mats and tufts and so on, like what we see here. And again, this relates to there being more light and these nutrients down at the bottom. Here's some examples of shoreline fouling from other places in the Great Lakes where zebra mussels have invaded. Here's eastern Lake Erie. This is basically the same thing that I showed a few photos back where that black material had washed up on the beach. Some pretty dramatic examples of algae from the bottom, tufts from the bottom, washing up on the beach. Here's one from Lake Ontario, and here's one from Lake Michigan. I know my family, we go up and we camp in Door County late summer every year, and we often see these types of wash-up conditions on the beaches in Green Bay and Door County. And so this is something that is pretty commonly associated with the zebra mussel invasion. Okay, so I actually want to quickly show you a video that was taken by Mike Spear that gives a picture of what's... Wow. Nice sound effects, huh? Shows what is happening in Lake Mendota right now. You may have seen things from the shore, but this video gives you a sense... Oh. Or baby stuff here. I'm not even getting it. All right, we'll get some audio visual issues. Well, in this video, you can see, I sort of froze up. Yes. Okay. Well, let's skip the video. But what I was going to show, I'll try to describe it in words. There were kind of descend through the water column, and you could hear the sounds, and get down to the bottom, and the bottom was covered in these green mats. And Mike was had his GoPro camera on, and was pulling these big, thick, fluffy green mats off the bottom. Okay? So these mats were basically covering the bottom, and they were about this thick. They're gooey and fluffy. You pull them off, and underneath them, you would see a carpet of zebra mussels, right? And they were basically blanketing the rocks. There were areas where there was sand, and there weren't any zebra mussels, but if there was a rock there, it was blanketed in them. But you had to pull aside these mats. So these are the tufts that are sort of washing up and floating in, that you're seeing floating around in the water column. They start down on the bottom, and then they'll float up, or because of wave action, they'll get pushed into shore. And he was picking up rocks and holding them in front of the camera, and you were seeing that the bottom of the rock didn't have any zebra mussels on it because it was down in the sand, but the top was just completely encrusted in them. So I wish I could show this to you. You can go to the Center for Limnology blog, and there was a blog post that we did yesterday that talks about Mike Spear's experiences out there, and shows the video that he took of the bottom habitat, the zebra mussels, and these mats. So that would be one way I would suggest you can kind of check that out. Or you could just go jump in, but you might not want to. So we should expect clear water. And it might be that if we're taking Secchi depth measurements, we're going to see them get clearer. And I think, these always vary a lot. They're going to continue to vary a lot, but I really do think we're going to see clearer water. But the flip side is that there are these tufts, right? We're going to see increased risk of blue-green algae blooms, but the thing that I'm really more concerned about are these bottom mats. These mats then floating up to the surface, weed overgrowth, and various types of shoreline fouling like I showed pictures of. And sort of the whole focus of emphasis in the lake, all the productivity, or a lot of the productivity is really going to be moving more towards the bottom rather than up in the water column. So a lake-wide shift from the open water to the bottom. So I think if I could characterize this, I would say that the lake will continue to have some aspects of poor water quality, but in a very different way than what we're used to. The water itself won't be sort of this pea green color that we sometimes see. We're going to see more productivity on the bottom that gets washed up inshore. And then, of course, we're going to have some time to talk about this, but what do we do about it? And, I feel like I'm just wrapping my mind around this issue as it's really been unfolding in the last couple of weeks. But I think the first message that I want to emphasize is that focusing on phosphorus reduction is more important than ever, because fundamentally the problem with these lakes is too much phosphorus, and that holds whether the system has zebra mussels or not. And the reason why zebra mussels are having these impacts is because there's so much excess phosphorus in the system. So if we can reduce the phosphorus in the system, we can turn down the magnitude of the impact of the zebra mussels. So this lesson that we've been focusing on of reducing phosphorus still holds true 100%. It doesn't change anything. We have to recognize that it's likely that the lake and our lakes are going to be fundamentally changed as a result of this. Zebra mussels are an ecosystem engineer and have, in many cases, typically transformed the system from something to something else. So it's kind of like a different system. Spiny water flea and zebra mussels may have interactive effects. We don't really know how these two species are going to combine to influence the system. And I think that's something that I'm quite curious about. In a lot of cases, I think we're going to have to focus on managing human expectations. There isn't a simple silver bullet that we can use to deal with the zebra mussel problem, and we're going to have to accept that a lot of these changes are going to play out while we try to figure out what to do. And like in any change, there are going to be winners and losers. So some fish species that can feed on zebra mussel are going to do really well, and there are going to be other fish species that, let's say, used to feed on zooplankton that aren't going to do as well. And this is something that, again, not every species in the lake is going to do poorly. Some of them are going to do well. And so think of it as changing stage, and some species are going to benefit and some are going to really lose out. And here's a picture from Lake Wingra in 2012. And this is something that I kind of see as, again, not emblematic of what we'd see in Lake Mendota, because Lake Wingra is really shallow. But you look out on Lake Wingra in this year, and there were these kind of mats up at the surface. But the water itself was really clear. And so the question you need to ask is, was there a good water quality here or not? It's not navigable. You can't even get your canoe through there. At the same time, if you use a Secchi measurement and you looked at that data, you'd say, wow, the lake is really cleared up. So it makes us think a little bit in a more complex way about what is water quality? What do we consider to be high quality environment? And we realize that it's a very multidimensional thing. The Secchi measurement doesn't capture a lot of things like this. And I think we're going to have more of these types of challenges with these mats and scums in the Madison lakes in the coming years. At the same time, I feel confident that we're going to continue to have the benefit of being on these lakes, and I think these lakes, even though they provided us with challenges, still really improve our quality of life. I think this is just another chapter in the changing nature of our environment. I think the terrace, though, will still always be a fantastic place to go. Hopefully it doesn't get too smelly. And with that, I think I can just open it up to questions, and hopefully we can get a little bit of a conversation.
Yes.
The outcome of zebra mussels, is it heavily lake dependent? My family has a place in northern Indiana. It was one of the first inland lakes to get zebra mussels, maybe even back in the 80s. And some of these outcomes did not happen on that lake at all.
Yeah.
It got a little clearer And
Yeah.
over time, actually, the zebra mussels dissipated, and you hardly see them anymore. Is that an unusual?
I would say, the outcomes of zebra mussels can vary widely. And that's why it's hard to say, hey, this is what we think is going to happen in Lake Mendota. I was hesitant to make predictions, but now we're seeing these things start to unfold. I feel a little more confident that, these sort of more extreme impacts you might see here. But there are lakes that do have really low abundances of zebra mussels, and they don't have huge impacts. So it varies a lot from place to place. As you might expect, because all lakes are different, right? And so they're going to respond differently. Yeah?
Both Daphnia eat algae, and then spiny water fleas eat Daphnia. Do they both excrete a lot of phosphorus after eating these things?
They excrete phosphorus, but they also collect that phosphorus in their bodies, right? Zebra mussels do collect the phosphorus in their bodies as well. The thing about zebra mussels is that the reason why they seem to have this effect is they're excreting them right on the bottom, in a place where that bottom algae takes it up. Meanwhile, Daphnia are swimming around in the water column, and they're excreting some phosphorus, but it gets spread out through the water column. So, but yeah, any organism out there in the environment excretes some phosphorus. Any organism also has phosphorus stored in their body. So an organism is both a pool of phosphorus and also a source of phosphorus. Very dynamic. Good question. Yeah.
Now, what can be done, if anything, to halt the growth of zebra mussels in other areas? Is there anything that can be done?
Well, there are people working on ways of controlling them, like let's say using chemical means. And they have been, it's possible to kill zebra mussels in a small area. There are things that are toxic to zebra mussels, but in a lake like Mendota, those types of strategies really aren't viable. And I don't think anybody would think that adding a toxic chemical to Lake Mendota in sufficient quantities to kill off zebra mussels would be a good idea. And if 3 zebra mussels make it through and end up surviving the chemical treatment, then zebra mussels will just pop back up again. And maybe even if you could kill them all, someone could reintroduce them again. So I feel that those types of strategies are, maybe at some point in the future it could be a possibility, but we don't have any tools now that we can use to control them. But perhaps some subtle changes to the food web could, maybe some fish species that feed on them, for example, could help control their impacts or keep them at bay to some extent. Yeah?
You talked about, I think you mentioned billions in economic impact, maybe
Millions.
Millions,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And zebra mussels have been in the Great Lakes for a while.
Yeah.
And, so I know that, I remember a couple of years ago, there was a lot of news around Chicago, sort of intake, that were, intakes that were getting completely foul with mussels. I'm just curious whether, as this kind of progresses across, freshwater lakes in the U.S., has there been a resurgence in, has the funding increased at all for research? And kind of what are some of the cutting edge questions that you guys are looking at? What the sort of landscape is in terms of the scientific research?
Yeah, okay, that's a broad question. I think in terms of zebra mussels, when they first started spreading, were really on people's radar. I mean, in the late 90s and early 2000s was when zebra mussels were really popping up in a lot of Wisconsin lakes. So that's when I think maybe the peak interest in, let's study zebra mussels happened. And there's a lot of research happening then. Here we are 15 to 20 years later getting zebra mussels in the Madison lakes. And, we're sort of past the peak interest in zebra mussels because, there's hundreds and hundreds of inland lakes and waterways that have them now. And it's kind of remarkable that we're only getting zebra mussels in the Madison lakes now. In fact, in 2002, zebra mussels did show up in Lake Mendota. I don't know if any of you remember that, but there were press releases and there were small numbers of zebra mussels discovered there, around the time that you'd expect them to have invaded. I mean, the Madison lakes are heavily trafficked, people moving their boats in and out, and I just thought that they would get invaded in the early 2000s. And they didn't. They died out. And I have no idea of why in 2002 they kind of got a bit of a foothold, and they dead out. That's not normal for zebra mussels. So to ask your question, I mean, to address your question, I mean, there's a whole wide range of sort of basic and applied issues that relate to these. I mean, my personal interests are in sort of looking at Lake Mendota and Lake Monona as a holistic ecosystem and trying to understand how these changes ripple and cascade through the system. Often it's very complex and often it's somewhat unpredictable as well. So, but there's a whole range of questions. And, there's not that much research happening, unfortunately. So,
We have time for one more question.
A surge in funding.
No. Yeah.
Does it make sense to introduce fish species that feed on zebra mussels? You mentioned that as a...
No. I mean, there are fish species that are already there that will feed on zebra mussels, and they may play some small role in controlling them, but I wouldn't start introducing stuff. Let's get something more from the back. How about you? Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm a bird watcher, and I noticed that there's been an increase in population of diving ducks in the fall, particularly the bubbleheads and the lesser scout. And I did a little research online, and they do like zebra mussels.
Yeah.
Is there, could you speak to that? And then also, is there a toxin bioaccumulation in birds that eat these?
Okay. Good question. So I mentioned winners and losers. This could be, it could be winners. Now, I don't know if zebra mussels have been here long enough really to see a change like that, but I wouldn't be surprised if, buffleheads are now attracted to, to the Madison lakes on their migratory routes because there are zebra mussels here. We've really only had one fall so far with, significant numbers of zebra mussels, and that was fall of 2016. But again, it wouldn't surprise me at all. If they feed on zebra mussels, they may be coming here in greater numbers. There are also issues with botulism, avian botulism outbreaks that are related to zebra mussels. So again, I can't get into it, but there have been studies that have found that zebra mussels are fed upon by a particular species of fish, and then those fish get fed upon by some fish-eating birds, and then that has caused the avian botulism outbreak. So there are these types of things that have been documented. For sure.
I'd like to thank Jake for coming in today, and I'll stay for a few moments.
I'll stick around.
And things like that. But there are a couple of things coming up before you walk out the door. So if you want to learn more about limanology, they're having an open house on Friday, June 23rd. You want to write this down. We'll also go out, look for our website or on Facebook. That is Friday, June 23rd from 2 until 6 p.m. You actually can go out on the Limnos. They've brought great students, and it's important for us to support our scientists at the University of Wisconsin. Also, really important that you probably haven't think about more when you're selling your shore station, moving your boats to other lakes, you were really going to have to be vigilant and getting those zebra mussels off there, and even seaweed, because the eggs can be in the plant life. So if you're going to a different lake or taking your boat up north, or your friends and family, tell them that. I'd also like to recognize we've got some scientists in the room. So if you are a scientist at the UW or the DNR, then please raise your hand. Or retired, hire people, hire. We'd like to thank all those people. Also, we have some board members from the Yahara Lakes Association here. I'd like to thank them for supporting the Clean Lakes Alliance. We are going to be doing our mailing, and so if you are a member of Yahara Lakes Association, the mailing will be coming out from the Clean Lakes Alliance and them. And please tell, if you've got neighbors, please tell them to donate to the Clean Lakes Alliance and supporting our campaign here, which supports programming like this. Also, we have Loop the Lake coming up and Shoreline Swim. Volunteer Day today, I'm leaving here, and there's 180 employees from Land's End working down on Lake Wabisa, on the shoreline down there. A takeaway to a little soundbite, Lake Mendota, water clears over 4 years. So a drop of water ends Lake Mendota, it takes 4 years for it to move down the lake. Now, as you heard, 2 weeks to clean the pool of water, and before it was, I'm scientifically mad, but remember it was 4 years before to move the water through, and now it's actually being cleaned by zebra mussels in 2 weeks. And thank you everybody for coming today, and look forward to seeing you next month, and be safe on the lakes.